Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hero News. Kia ora, Chewy. How are you, my love?
Good, good. As I say, just before we went on, I had completely forgotten what day it was. So I was like frantically trying to get the dog out to do her business, make a cup of tea, get my shit together. I think I've covered it quite well, and no one will notice.
Until you tell them. And then they'll all notice. Do you find that when your partner's away that you lose track of everything?
Of everything, yes. Yes.
No, I know sometimes, not so much now, but in previous days when a partner wasn't around, especially in summertime, because here in Dunedin, on the longest day, you still kind of have a dusky light up until 10:30, 11 at night sometimes. I'd be working on my laptop, starting to be hungry, then realizing it was 9:40 at night and I hadn't stopped working because the sun does tricks to me. But there you go. Hi, how is everybody? It's a very, very sad day in New Zealand. We're going to get into that. So one thing I'm not going to do, just so you know, in fact, oh gosh, we didn't even test our sound today, Chewy. That was bad of us. Hopefully it's all working. One thing I'm not going to do at the start of the show is push too hard on our merch. It just feels like we can do that in the second half of the show because, I mean, much like the National Party tried their hardest today, there's a time and a place. And I don't feel like before we talk about this issue of the horrific day in New Zealand, I just doesn't feel quite right going, hey, come and buy some of our merch. We will be saying that, but we'll probably be doing it later on in the show. You guys know the deal. You know that we've got this July drop. You know it ends tonight. If you don't know what I'm talking about, we'll give you all the details after we go through this first story because, it just doesn't feel like a thing to kind of be like, hey, let's play you a little song, that kind of with all this news that's going on. The other thing we're going to do tonight is we're going to open up Discord. In fact, we've already opened up Discord. All you need to do is log into Discord and wait for your chance to come and have a chat. We did it last week and had a couple of callers come through, I believe, from memory. Everybody who gets on Discord tonight and chats to us goes into the draw for some of that merch as well. So we're going to do a giveaway tonight as well. And I see that, I think it was Adam, who won last week's giveaway on Thursday night, has purchased his top. We just sent Adam a discount code, and then he was able to pick what he wanted to and get the discount, and whoosh, off he goes. Perfect. So, that's what we're going to do. We're going to give you a chance to win some gear tonight, and it's the last night that gear is going to be available. To win gear tonight, all you need to do is talk to us on Discord, and that will be the last part of the show. So we're going to talk about this shooting, first of all. We're going to talk about the last day, I think, for One News to put out some information from their polling. And they talk today about race relations in New Zealand. And that's the polling they released today. We'll have a look at that. And then basically we'll open up the lines, Chewy, as they say. Get on the old dog and bone, the old telephone, which it's not anymore, and give you a chance to interact. Now, just so you know how we want to run Discords on a Thursday night, there might be no one that wants to come through on it. There might be 1 people. There might be 10 people. That's fine. But how we're going to run it is we're basically, any of the topics we've talked about this week are open for grabs. Any question that you may have, it's almost like an AMA. And really, it's just open up for general conversation about what we are all about and what we do. So politics, news, BHN, questions to us, all available on Discord on a Thursday night. And we'll always end the show with that. So if we finish our news at 9:40 and we have no Discord, then we say sayonara at 9:40. So that's in ball in your court for how you want to continue with that. Right. Anything you want to say before we kick off? Chewy, we are going to go straight into the shooting news. That's going to be the first story of the night, and I've got several things queued up to play. Hopefully, in fact, shall I do this thing that I only ever do when I'm nervous about sound, and when I do this, it's never a problem. Hang on, let me just do this and go. I'll play a little music in the background, Chewy, while you're doing a bit of a thing, and make sure people can hear it, because this is what we do. Evening chaps and chapettes from Scott. We should have some, you know what we should do? We should get some music that's like when we're doing the text messages. Text message music.
Smooth jazz.
Well, thanks for joining us today at Hubba Huge. It's 1:45 and coming up to Love Songs till midnight.
Pet Patrol.
I'm assuming you could hear that music, Chewy, and others.
Yeah, that was
that means
all
we're
good,
all good. All right. Anything you want to get to, or is it just everyone saying hello in the chat at the moment?
No, I got one big piece of news before we crack on to the other big piece of news.
Yep. Yeah, I saw that.
Looked like they won their first game, and by all accounts, a great game.
Yeah, spoiler.
By my,
in fact,
my
here,
feed.
Let's start with something a bit lighter. I think I'm not a huge fan of football. I like sport, like you, Chewy. I'm a huge fan of sport. But I'm going to go to one of the games for sure, because I went and saw Michael Jackson at Mount Smart Stadium in Auckland. I mean, Michael Jackson's a bit of a legendary performer, right? But I didn't go because I was desperate to see Michael Jackson. I went because I knew if I was in the 1960s and I had the chance to see the Beatles, and I didn't, like my kids 30 years later will be like, what? You had a chance to see the Beatles and you did it? So it was more like I was going for the event. I wanted to say, I've seen Michael Jackson. It's one of the reasons I went. I feel a bit the same about the Women's Football World Cup. I want to go and check out the Women's Football World Cup as opposed to necessarily the game. Now, the game I think might be New Zealand versus Norway. I don't know, one of the Scandinavian countries. And they're playing it in Dunedin on the 30th. So
Norway
Sundays.
was the game that just happened.
That was tonight. Okay, so there's another game in Dunedin on the 30th. But I think I'm going to go along. I'm going to go along and check it out and, be a part of the spectacle, because never again in our lifetimes will there be a Football World Cup in New Zealand. So I want to go see it. So I think I'll go check out that game. It's a Sunday night, so don't worry, Hearing Users. We won't drop you out on that night. Yeah, anyway. But yes, I don't know if we should have possibly gone spoiler alert there, Chewy, if people didn't want to know and they're watching, but oh well, fuck them.
Oh, I don't know how it works.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's get into this news story, the biggest news story of the day. Obviously, this will be one of the biggest news stories of the week. Actually, that sounds a bit flippant as well. I'm not gonna speak to it like that. We're sticking with TVNZ for a good portion of tonight, mostly because that's what I watched tonight, so I saw what they were saying about it. And we're just going to start with a 40-second clip with Simon Dello going through the events and the timeline of what happened today.
Let's take a look at exactly how events unfolded in Auckland CBD this morning. At 7:22, police received multiple emergency calls about a person firing a weapon on the third floor of a building currently under renovation. Officers were on the scene within minutes. 10 minutes later, police entered the building where many people stuck inside were desperately trying to hide from the gunman. At 8 a.m, armed police found the shooter inside a lift shaft where he'd barricaded himself in. The offender fired at police, injuring an officer. Shots were exchanged and the offender was later found dead. Police also discovered the bodies of two other people. Just after 1 p.m, cordons around Lower Queen Street were lifted, but a scene guard remains in place.
So that's the timeline, 40 seconds from TVNZ, and then TVNZ will go into the main story covering off what happened today. We'll continue with that.
That deadly shooting has cast a dark shadow just as the eyes of the world focus on New Zealand for the biggest women's sporting event on the planet. Police confirm 3 people are dead, including the gunman, and 10 others injured after the shooter, armed with a pump-action shotgun, stormed a building undergoing renovations in downtown Auckland. The gunman's been identified as 24-year-old Matutangi Reid, who was on home detention for violence offences, including male assaults female. He was wearing an electronic monitoring bracelet, but had an exemption to work at the building site.
This is some conversation that's been going around today, Chewy. We're going to play some footage from Christopher Luxon today. We're going to play some footage from Chippy. And when Chippy talked about this, not all the information had been released. People were confused as to how he could have an electronic monitoring anklet and also get himself into town. And what we found out is he worked on that site and he had an exemption to go to that site, which was his place of work. I don't think it's been confirmed whether he was still working there, but there was an exemption, which means he didn't breach his conditions of having the anklet because he was allowed to go to that site because he was at some stage or currently, we're not sure, working there. So that's why he was able to do it without, like you expect people to say, well, how could he have had be electronically monitored and get into town? Well, he was actually allowed to go there. It was part of the conditions of his, do you call it bail? Whatever the sentence is when it's in there.
Yeah, it's monitoring.
The shooting. Shooting occurred at this building in the CBD near the bottom of Queen Street by the city's major transport hub. We have extensive coverage this evening. The One News team standing by across the scene and at Eden Park, where the Women's Football World Cup is kicking off in just under an hour. We begin tonight with Barbara Drever, who's been covering the day's dramatic events since this morning.
Armed police storming a downtown construction site in search of a gunman on the loose. On the upper floors, workers hide from the shooter as he roams through the building.
We basically barricaded the door to the office we were sitting in and just started hiding on the desk. We tried to run out. And he was still just standing in the staircase holding what looked like to be a shotgun.
Breakfast was live as rapid shots were fired.
What's happening? We can hear firing, we can hear gunshots coming from the building.
A worker could be seen running for his life. The gunman, who was barricaded in an elevator shaft, opened fire at police who shot back.
We heard shots fired like machine gun, bam, bam, bam.
We were really scared, because you don't know where the bullet's going to come from and where it's going to go.
This police officer was one of 10 people injured, most of them taken to Auckland Hospital. Police found 2 bodies on the lower floors. Shocked survivors were evacuated from the building.
They're all being moved out really quickly. Ambulances are now being allowed to go in.
We were right at the entrance and I saw 20 people rushing out of the building and telling the pedestrians to move. I was like, what happened? And I go ask them, they say we saw a guy with a shotgun in his hand and he was aiming for people.
But it was hours before those taking shelter on the roof would be let down. The gunman was a 24-year-old on home detention for domestic violence-related charges.
However, he had an exemption to work at the site, and so there's no indication at this stage of a breach of those conditions.
The hotel construction site turned from an active situation to a crime scene.
We are very good at chaos. It's something that we don't like, but we are prepared for.
The world's best footballers shocked as they woke up in hotels surrounding the cordon. The day Auckland wanted to show off its best face to the world, starting with tragedy.
And Barbara's with us now live. Kia ora, Barb. You've just got new details about the gunman?
Yes, that's right. Corrections have confirmed that Matu Tangimatua Reid was on home detention and he checked in with his probation officer just yesterday. Now, under the terms of his conditions, he was allowed to come to work to this hotel construction site behind me. He was an employee of a contractor there. Corrections say that he had completed drug and alcohol programs and he'd also been involved in an anti-violence program. Up until this morning, they say, that they considered he'd done everything right, but they'll obviously be conducting a review into what's happened.
We saw in your report, you were there as the shots rang out. Tell us what that was like.
Well, you can imagine it was shocking for everyone outside. You can only imagine what it was like for those inside. And probably the worst thing was seeing the workers that sheltering behind pillars, and they were up against the windows and they had their arms around each other, supporting each other as obviously the active shooter went through that building. When they came out, I did speak to quite a few of those construction workers, most of them migrant workers, and they said they were okay, but you could tell from their faces they were pale, their hands they were shaking, and so you could tell that they're heavily traumatised by that event. Some were taken away by police, obviously witnesses, and their employer says they'll be putting in support measures to help them through this, what has been an extremely traumatic event.
So there's story number one. Chewie, it kind of gives a rundown of what happens. What are your thoughts? I have lots of thoughts. What are yours?
Yeah, look, it was a hell of a thing to wake up. You know, you pick up your phone and that's the lead story, and you're like, oh, Jesus. It's always really tempting to try and put the pieces together with like little to no information. Obviously, the news reporters are trying to do that on the fly as well. That lady's been there all day.
Yeah.
From the sounds of it. She was right there in the morning. Yeah. She's still there. Let her go home. Yeah, I mean, people are like, as we're saying about the electronic monitoring, how to get hold of a weapon.
I think that's a big.
Things.
That's one of the biggest questions: is how did he get hold of a weapon? Because I mean, I think that we're all in agreement. Maybe not everyone watching or listening or watching this on demand is that we have a pretty safe country in general. The exceptions doesn't necessarily represent the rules with our guns, and people are going to get rid of illegal guns. I watched the actual press conference with the police commissioner, and he said that they'd done sweeps of this guy's house. He was monitored. This is not a case of someone who was like slipping through the cracks with a cachet of firearms at his house. Everything was done right, and he got the gun off Uncle Bob, stole it from somewhere, off whatever, don't know, went out and bought it illegally the night before. So it's and look, we're not, maybe because we're just a couple of buffhead, we're not journalists. I love it when people talk about us being journalists, and I have to go, we're not journalists. I'm not a journalist, not a trained journalist. It's not my job. I'm not in that area. But I am a trained camera operator from the looks of things. I still want to approach this with an element of seriousness and respectability and professionalism. However, in saying that, as I start to be unprofessional, it would appear pretty obviously it's someone who has had a problem with something or some people at that workplace and has gone back for what he would deem as retribution. You hear about postal workers in America going postal. That's why that term means that when people are in a situation where for whatever reason something's happened and they put themselves out to correct what they think is an injustice. Now, I'm not saying any of that's happened here, but he worked there. He went back there with a gun. He used a firearm at the gun. There's obviously some connection to do. It wasn't a coincidence. With something and someone and some reason he did that to do with the workplace. You can now clean up all my shit, Chewy, while I go clean up my camera.
I mean, I would agree. Look, we're connecting dots here, but it feels like he was either sacked or it was workplace bullying, and it was a guy that was prone to violence anyway. He's decided to get even with someone, and then as one of you mentioned in the chat, that ends up with suicide by cop because he knows how deep a hole he's dug. I mean, it's so sad. The silver lining, if there is one here, is at least it was just a shotgun and not like a semi-automatic or something of that ilk.
I think when you see the police officer coming holding his eye, that's because he'll have buckshot in his face. Whereas, as you say, if it was an AK or if it was an assault rifle, it would be, I mean, I don't want to be graphic, but it would be a bullet in the head, so it's so hard to not even try and find the good side of it. There is no good side, but there are some realities that it could have been so much worse. And look, I what I just said is kind of really inappropriate, and I get that. But I think it will be interesting. How do I say this?
Hard to choose your words.
Yeah, how do you say? Because it's not interesting. It's fucking horrific. But let me put it this way: I wouldn't be surprised if the deceased people are somehow connected to him. In other words, it's not random. It's not, and I'm not saying that in any kind of obviously in defense of him. But I'm just, these things when they happen overseas are a connection between the shooter and the shootee. Very, very infrequently is there a shooter who kills someone who they're not somewhat connected to. It does happen, random drive-bys, that kind of stuff, but it's far more common for it. And put that on the back of him working there, and it's conjecture. I'll shut up. But no one else will say this because they're professional journalists. We're a couple of drunkards from Dunedin just spitting shit, and I think everyone's thinking, obviously there's a connection, so I'm going to say obviously there's a connection.
I mean, I would imagine, well, the police do their thing now, right? I see that Corrections has opened up an investigation on how he was monitored and how he was checked and that sort of thing. The police will be running down the gun and following his movements, probably talking to Corrections as well.
Yep.
We'll see more details come out in the weeks ahead. But yeah, I mean, it's a natural human reaction to try and sort out a pattern or make a guess at what happened.
Well, let's also have a look at a little bit more about the shooter. His name is Matu Reid. He's 24. This is from One News website. This is about his sentence that he had the bracelet for. Reid was drinking with a female who has name suppression before he became angry. This is 2021. And the two got into an argument. He made verbal threats and kicked her in the stomach, which led to a male assaults female charge he would later face. He then put his hands around her throat for 10 seconds, leading to strangulation charge. Reid went on to repeatedly slap and punch the woman, pushing the handle of a pair of scissors into her torso and swinging a bottle of wine at her, which missed. The woman then left to get police, and Reid burned items in her room while she was gone, leading to a willful damage charge. For his crimes, Reid was sentenced to 5 months home detention on March 28, 2023. Some conditions of home detention were as follows: not to have any alcohol or drugs, to attend an appropriate non-violence program, to complete an alcohol and drug program, not to associate with the victim. The victim forgave Reid for his offending and stated he had been doing well recently as he was working. Prior to this sentencing, Reid had one other conviction for common assault dated from 2020-2021. Reid's probation officer commented that his risk of reoffending was low, but his risk of causing harm to other people because of the violent nature of his offending was high. The probation officer recommended home detention, which Reid eventually was sentenced to. I mean, again, this is, you know what's going to happen with ACT tomorrow, or the next day, or the next day. They're going to just use this as a way to say how pathetic home detention is and everyone should be locked up. Because if he was locked up inside, this wouldn't have happened. I mean, it's for this individual isolated case, probably hard to argue that. But as we always say here, anecdotal evidence doesn't necessarily represent what the data would say. But this is where this is going to go. We're going to have a look shortly at what National had to say today. And they tried so hard not to politic off the back of this. And they got so close to not politicking off the back of this. Whilst they were saying we're not going to politic off this, they got so close to not doing it until they politicked off the back of this. We'll get to that shortly. But Chewy, anything else, mate?
No, you've covered everything.
All right, so let's have a look. This is Mark Mitchell and their hairless leader talking to the press today about not doing... I mean, look, Christopher Luxon's saying all the right things, right? Like, if he had have actually done what he says in the first 2 minutes, I'd be applauding him tonight. Yeah. But they got so close... And I don't want to use this as a way to shit on National tonight. I don't. But they got so close to going, we're not going to do politics today, until they slipped into doing politics. So I actually kind of disagree. Actually, let's not do this first, Joey. I actually think today is a day for doing politics. Because when it's the other way, when it's a, let's say, right-wing shooter in America who shoots up a school, yeah, and it's the right-wing politicians who go, this is not the time. It's like, that's actually exactly the time. So I actually disagree with we shouldn't be talking about this today. I think they should be talking about this today. However, what annoys me is them saying, we're not going to talk about this today. We're not going to politic today, and then politicking. So I don't actually have a problem with them politicking. Right? I have a problem with them saying, yes, we're going to take the moral high ground and not politic, and then slip in some politicking. That's what I have trouble with, Chewy. So let's see what they had to say. I've got a clip that's about 2 minutes, and I've got two 30-second clips as well.
Morning and aren't going home tonight. And I want to express on behalf of the National Party our condolences to those families that have actually lost loved ones. I want to also wish a speedy recovery to those that have been injured. And importantly, also acknowledge those that will have been traumatised by the events that transpired not that far away from here this morning. What we saw from our police and first responders was some incredibly heroic activity. And I think when all the events of today are...
Look, I think if he'd stopped talking after 3 minutes, all of us would be applauding him. In fact, most people probably are. Maybe I'm being a bit picky. Maybe. We'll see.
Together, more and more heroes will...
I think as soon as Mark Mitchell leans in, I started to go, here we go. That's what I thought. But then even at the start of his statement, I was like, oh yeah, that's okay. And they just couldn't quite stick that landing.
Emerged from what happened here this morning. I want to acknowledge behind every police officer is our family, as a partner, as parents, our kids. And they will have been watching those events unfold this morning, hoping and praying that their person was safe. And I also want to acknowledge the others that were looking at that site, hoping that their person was also safe as a worker on that site. There are lots of questions that New Zealanders will have, but today is not that day. Today is not a day for politics. It is really a day to remember and to express
Thank you,
tremendous
everybody.
gratitude to our police officers, to our ambulance officers.
It's like people who wish that Oscar winners would go, thank you for the win, and walk off stage, exit stage left. This should have been exit stage left. And look, I actually am being a bit harsh because it's not heavy politicking, but it's not quite sticking the landing.
To our hospital staff and members of the public who stepped up and offered help when it was most needed by so many. So we want to thank them for all of their efforts, and we also want to acknowledge that is New Zealand at its best in a really tough situation. With that, Mark and I are happy to take any questions you may have. Look, again, I mean, we've got a comprehensive set of law and order policies that Mark and I have talked a lot about this issue in the past year and a half. Again, I don't really want to get into that today. There will be a day for us to talk about politics and what happened here and why it happened.
It's okay.
But that's not today.
Should there be a review, though?
Should there be a
again,
review?
you know, our position on this is well expressed and been well understood. But again, I'm not going to get into that. Sorry, today. We can talk about it tomorrow.
Can I just say that I think Chris has captured it very well. But I don't want anyone to underestimate just how difficult this situation was for the police to deal with. It's almost the worst scenario that they could have put in front of them. You had a very big building with multiple floors. You had an active shooter. They had to recover people that had already been shot and injured. They were conscious of the fact that there was people in there that could have been taken hostage, and there were shots being fired as they arrived on scene. And I want to acknowledge our frontline staff, the ones that put the cordons up.
Can I just say this? And this is not criticism. Genuinely, it's not. This is more observation. The National Party here is focusing quite heavily on, thanking the police, which is appropriate. In the press conference with Chippy, the first people he thanked was the ambulance staff. I'm not criticising. I'm just saying it was interesting observation that the National Party went straight to thanking the police, which is appropriate. That was their number one. And the Labour Party went to thanking the ambulance drivers, which was their number one. Both are appropriate. I just thought it was an interesting observation as to where they went first with their thanks. I'm not saying one should be thanked more than the other. Make that clear. It was just an interesting observation.
And kept the public safe. I want to acknowledge our AOS and our STG members. They were fearless, and they went about their job in a professional way, and they showed that they're a world-class police service that actively went in there to locate this offender and make sure that no one else was hurt or killed. And I've got no doubt in my mind that they saved lives in their actions today. And so we want to acknowledge them. We want to acknowledge the ambulance officers that responded, our victim support. We spoke to victim support. They set up immediately down at the Cloud, and have also had support up at the hospital. Our two police officers that were injured, one of them critically, our thoughts are with their families and with the entire Blue family. And of course, the two guys that turned up to work, like Chris said, thinking that they were going to just put in a good day's work and get home safely to their families, and they're not. And their families aren't going to see them walking through that front door again. And so our thoughts go out to there. Do we want to hold the government to account on this? Yes, but that is for another day. Today it is about acknowledging our police officers, our first responders, and the families that have suffered a terrible tragedy today.
So
I'm not sure if I'm mishearing that or not.
That sticking of the landing that I was talking about at the end of Mark, and this is where I was going to stop it anyway, at the end of the Mark Mitchell speech, blaming the government. Don't get this wrong. Do we want to hold the government accountable for this? Is saying the government is accountable for this. They got so fucking close. They got so close to sticking the landing. Like even a little bit of that with Luxon going, we have comprehended. That was actually okay, right? They got so close, and then Mark Mitchell blamed the government.
Again, and so our thoughts go out to there. Do we want to hold the government to account on this? Yes, but that is for another day. Today it is about acknowledging our police officers, our first responders, and the families that have suffered a terrible tragedy today.
If it's not the government's fault, according to National, why would they hold them to account?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I'd heard him correctly. It almost sounded like we want to hold the gunman to account.
Government.
Just the way he mumbled that bit, and I'm like, well, how are you going to do that? Dude's dead.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. Like, I'm going to give some credit to Luxon here. That was probably the most humanistic string of words that I've heard him say in a long time. It wasn't didn't seem to be very rehearsed.
Yep.
It seemed genuine. Small criticism, probably wouldn't have even bothered taking any questions from reporters. They weren't going to add anything to what you just said.
Well, because you know what the reporters are going to do. They're going to look for their headline. They're going to go, now, Mr. Luxon, how much does Labor suck? You know, that's obviously. So, yeah, maybe hindsight 2020, he shouldn't have. Maybe he didn't think it in the moment. Still give him credit. I agree with you. I think his original 3 minutes or 2 minutes, whatever it was spot on, was perfect. But I'm going to play you 2 more 30-second clips, and the longer they stand in front, the more I said they didn't stick the landing, the wobblier and wobblier that landing gets. About not speaking about it today.
I'm not surprised at all.
I'll do those now then, eh? So here's a little 30-second clip. Remember what I've said? They're not politicking, right? They're not politicking. But that landing, it's harder and harder.
Well, look, I mean, we've been really clear about our policy. We've got a comprehensive set of policies that Mark and I have unveiled over the course of the last year and a half now. It's really about backing our police, tackling gangs, serious consequences, and also ensuring that we have stronger sentencing. So, again, I'm not going to go into the detail of all of
I'm not going to go into the detail. I'll just list off all our policies because we're not politicking.
that. I honestly think it's disrespectful for us to do so today. We can do that tomorrow and in the coming days.
So there's that one, and I'll play one more little one. Remember, they're not politicking, and they want to make sure that everyone knows they're not politicking. This one is about 45 seconds.
Well, look, I mean, we've been talking about the rising levels of crime and how people are not feeling safe in their own homes, their own businesses and their own communities now for a year and a half. There is no doubt about it when we talk to New Zealanders up and down this country. That is the reality of how they feel, and quite rightfully so. We have seen crime get out of control.
But they're not politicking, Chewy. Today's not a day for politicking.
We've seen violent crime get out of control. So again, I'm not going to go into the details of policy and what's the right prescription, but we've had a comprehensive set of policies actually to think about actually how we reduce crime now for some time.
So it's actually not that different from every other day. We can solve this problem. We've got policies. We're not going to tell you what those are. That's actually no different from the past 12 months of policy announcement from National in general.
So it is important that we actually, as I keep saying, pay huge respect to the police officers that were involved, pay huge respect to the families that have lost their loved ones today, but we will talk about this in the coming days, I'm sure. We all have lots of questions about what and why and what transpired here, but unfortunately, that is not the day today.
Right. So, like I said, they got so close. And then the longer I think it was only 9 minutes, 10-minute press conference went on, the further away they got from sticking that landing. I've got a couple of other things I want to show, including Chippy's comments. But I've watched that and set it up, Chewy. So why don't you have a go at it? Seeing that's the first time you've seen my clips.
Yeah, like 90%, great. And then thank everybody, and then leave. And that's exactly what Arrest JK said. The correct response when the cameras turned up would have been, "Our hearts go out to the victims. Thanks to the police, etc., etc. No comment for today. Goodbye." Like in and out.
Yeah,
and we wouldn't have anything to say about it. We probably would have given them more props than anything. And then as you said, the longer it went on, the more they fell back into the old routines. It's like, yeah, we don't want to politicize this, but of course, I'm going to make reference to all the politicking I've done. Today's not a day for politics, though. But here's a little sneak preview of the politicking that we'll be doing about this in the future. Stay tuned. Yeah. It's crass. It's bullshit. They're not good at it. And I think this has been my overriding thing. We're going to obviously look at Chris Hipkins' response as well. But this is one of the things that I want people to hold in their mind when they're talking to people that say it doesn't matter who I vote for. Because, hey, 90% of the time, maybe it doesn't. But then in a moment of crisis, your leader is important. We saw that with Jacinda 3 times.
Yeah.
We've seen it with Chris Hipkins a little bit. With the cyclone and now this. What would a Chris Luxon crisis response be like?
Yeah. Yeah, and look, I'll say it again. I'll be really clear so as to not be too critical. It's like, I don't agree that today is not the day for politicking. I actually don't. Like I said, if it's in America and it's a conservative Republican going after a mass shooting from a right-wing, extremist, now's not the time to talk about it. Actually, yes, it is. What I have a problem with, and I'll make it clear again, is people saying we're not going to politic off the backs of this. We're not going to score points off the back of this and then scoring points. That's where my problem lies. Yeah. Right, let's have a look at Chippy. Now, Chippy's a little bit more sterile in this. Chippy had this press conference, I think, at like 9:30 this morning, so they didn't have all the information. There's not a heck of a lot that he goes into here other than the facts and the figures, but there is one bit that I want to play for you because, of course, when these sorts of things happen around the world, the first question is ideological or not. Like, is this an extremist? Is this a religious based fundamentalist? Is this a political ideological fundamentalist? What is it? And this is just a very quick exchange. He said, I think he's talking to Jess Much here from TVNZ about there's no ideological situation here, which again lends this us talking out our asses because we don't know about this being a personalised attack. There was no extra threat. Like, Auckland opened back up quite quickly. There was no other places or no other people of interest after they figured out what had happened in some level. So let's have a look at what he had to say. The question is about, what do we know? And he goes into a very quick statement about it not being ideological.
Diplomatic level, Prime Minister, have you made any phone calls this morning, or have you left that to the High Commissioner level to liaise and reassure with some of the countries that have got teams here?
Yeah, the whole New Zealand diplomatic apparatus will obviously be sharing information as we can confirm it, including they will immediately be sharing with others around the world the fact that we haven't identified a national security, an ideological or a political motivation here.
What is the AOS? I know that there's been debate about the location of that specialist service. Given that it was in the CBD, obviously they were able to get there quicker. Does this make you and perhaps the police minister rethink some of the allocation of those resources?
I think it's just too early to even speculate on those sorts of things. Joe?
So, very quick, that's all we're going to get from Chippy, but I thought we'd actually also show you one other politician who responded today. Chloe Swarbrick is obviously the MP for Central Auckland, and she was live tweeting what was going on. So her Chloe shared via Twitter. So pretty much, so this says 13 hours ago, but it's been up for, so this was probably as it happened. If you're downtown Auckland Centre, please stay indoors as emergency services respond to an unfolding situation. We're in communication with the front line and will update as necessary and appropriate. It goes on to say, police have contained the situation in downtown Auckland City Centre. Here is their statement. Violence like this has no place in our city nor our country. We utterly reject it and are dedicated to ongoing work on evidence-based interventions to prevent it from ever happening again, which I fully expect will be openly and thoroughly discussed and debated in due course. There will be a time after grieving and reckoning with the senseless violence to address policies and politics. Deep condolences. So there you go. So there was, and I'm sure all the other politicians had some response to it on some level, but that was the MP in that area and the two leaders of our biggest parties. I thought that's probably enough for us to cover off on tonight, Tilly.
Yep. No, absolutely.
Anything in the chat? I'm going to play something else. I'm going to play, one of the things I didn't play for you off TVNZ News was a tourist in New Zealand from, I think, Argentina, saying, this is the first time I've ever seen this kind of thing. This kind of thing doesn't happen in my city. Like the kind of thing we say about when it happens in America, a tourist was saying that about being in New Zealand. And it was kind of like, whoa, that's interesting perspective to hear from someone else. Like, this kind of thing happens in New Zealand. It obviously has happened, but again, it's not part of our national narrative. I'm going to play you something shortly to do with America and when this thing happens in America, how they respond to it, just to have a look at a place that this thing does kind of happen, and it's to do with sports as well, which I'll get into, seeing this is all surrounding the FIFA Women's World Cup as well. But do we want to have a look? Is there anything in the chats that we want to get to before I go into that next stage?
Just one comment. Pretending to be human has a 3-minute limit for national MPs. I think that's just been proved. Write that down in the book of knowing. Yes, I think that's all I've got started there so far.
So I'm going to show you this. This may not have much to do with anything we're kind of talking about, to be honest, but I think it's interesting to see how only because it's the Women's World Cup, I thought to myself, this is a sporting event, right? And there's the shooting happening around a sporting event. I think this was 12 months ago, Uvalde shooting. Maybe it was more than that, 18 months ago. When the Uvalde shooting, the school shooting happened in America, there was the NBA Finals was on, I believe, at the time. Mm-hmm. Steve Kerr a former teammate of Michael Jordan. Now he's the coach of the Golden State Warriors. He came out and talked to the press after the shooting happened. There's no education here. I'm not trying to compare this to anything that happened in New Zealand. It just reminded me of this, and I wanted to play it for you in a country and from a sporting figure where this does happen regularly. So this is Steve Kerr talking to the press after the Uvalde shooting.
I'm not going to talk about basketball. Nothing's happened with our team in the last 6 hours. We're going to start the same way tonight. Any basketball questions don't matter. Since we left shoot-around, 14 children were killed 400 miles from here, and a teacher. And in the last 10 days, we've had elderly black people killed in a supermarket in Buffalo. We've had Asian churchgoers killed in Southern California, and now we have children murdered at school. When are we going to do something? I'm tired. I'm so tired of getting up here and offering condolences to the devastated families that are out there. I'm so tired of I'm tired of the moments of silence. Enough. There's 50 senators right now who refuse to vote on H.R. 8, which is a background check rule that the House passed a couple of years ago. It's been sitting there for 2 years. And there's a reason they won't vote on it, to hold on to power. So I ask you, Mitch McConnell, I ask all of you senators who refuse to do anything about the violence and school shootings and supermarket shootings, I ask you, are you going to put your own desire for power ahead of the lives of our children and our elderly and our churchgoers? Because that's what it looks like. It's what we do every week. So I'm fed up. I've had enough. We're going to play the game tonight, but I want every person here, every person listening to this, to think about your own child or grandchild or mother or father or sister, brother. How would you feel if this happened to you today? We can't get numb to this. We can't sit here and just read about it and go, well, let's have a moment of silence. Yeah, go Dubs, you know. Come on, Mavs, let's go. That's what we're going to do. We're going to go play a basketball game. And 50 senators in Washington are going to hold us hostage. Do you realize that 90% of Americans, regardless of political party, want background check, universal background check? 90% of us, we are being held hostage by 50 senators in Washington who refuse to even put it to a vote, despite what we, the American people, want. They won't vote on it because they want to hold on to their own power. It's pathetic. I've had enough.
So there would be an example, obviously, an extreme example of American-style response to, gosh, you can't say much more serious shooting. You know, I'm not leveling these things out, but the American culture when it comes to this kind of thing.
Now, I remember with it, you know, that speech obviously made the news at that stage, and everyone went, how raw, how powerful, how unscripted. And then the news cycle moved on. Nothing changed.
You mean this? Oh, you're going to do the same thing.
They've had more than one mass shooting in the US every day so far this year. And I mean, we can't.
And this one, powerful stuff and nothing happens.
Yeah. And I mean, there's no way that we can compare what we're talking about here to what happens over in the States. But in some degree, their conversation will always bleed over into the New Zealand conversation about guns and gun control. And I want to start a timer basically now. I think ACT are going to do one of two things. Or maybe they'll do both. They will go hard on the fact, as you said, that the guy shouldn't have been home detention. That's the big scandal here. Labor soft on crime.
Yep.
And they want to do that to draw attention away from the thing that they don't want to happen. They don't want a gun register.
Yeah.
That's consistently the thing that they've pushed against. And this is the perfect example of why we need one, because it would answer that question, where did he get the gun from? And then the person that gave him the gun, there's consequences for him. One of the things that Christopher Luxon likes. So, I think that gun register is an enormously important part of the puzzle. And I just take note of how people bring that up over the coming days.
Indeed. All right. We're going to move off this topic now, and we're going to move into a new part of the conversation. So now I'm going to remind you that this is our very last day for our drops, our July drops. You can head to bhnshop.nz until midnight tonight, and you can pick up either Christopher Luxon, not a businessman, just a board member, or if the left votes, the left wins, T-shirts and hoodies. They're all available to you until midnight tonight. If you want to get involved, and if you get one that happens during the live show, then you get a little song played for you. And remember, I'm putting in all the chats right now, the link to our Discord. If you get on Discord tonight and you come and have a chat with us, let's bring Discord across to the screen. Here it is. Let me bring it back up. You can, there we go. There's Discord happening at the moment. There you can, look, there's DOC Studios and there's Chewy. If you get on Discord tonight and you have a chat with us, you will go into the draw for a T-shirt. And, to be honest with you, if we have a lot of calls, maybe I'll do a couple of T-shirts. But if we have 1 or 2 calls, I'll do a T-shirt. And all you need to do is log yourself in, like I can see several people already have tonight because that list is growing. Drag yourself across here to the waiting room, right? And when you're in the waiting room, that means you are ready for us to come and have a chat with you. We're going to do the story on TVNZ's polls right now on race relations. If you want to come and have a chat with us, no pressure, jump onto Discord, jump into the waiting room, and when we get to the end of the story, we will either go to Discord or we will have an early night. Up to you. So the links are in all the moving all my shit around. The links are in all the chats. I've just put them in there again, so you can go and check those out, and you can get yourself into Discord, into the waiting room. After the story, we'll do some texts, we'll do some Discord if people want to do it. We'll give away a T-shirt or 2, and then we'll wrap up for the week. Right. Can't wait for my light blue hoodie if the left votes. Very cool. Okay, just so you know, if you've already purchased, and there's a good little chunk of you, the order gets put through tomorrow morning. That's why it finishes at midnight tonight, and they'll start to get, and the hoodies will get ordered, and T-shirts will get ordered tomorrow, and then they'll turn up on Monday, and then they'll start to get printed, and I'll hopefully have them in the post by Wednesday, Thursday of next week. So I'm fingers crossed that by the end of the month, gives me 10 days to get to the end of the month, you should be receiving your hoodies. That's what we're trying to do. Righty. Let's go and have a look at this TVNZ poll. This is the poll that came out during the week that was talking all about, who's where in the actual election cycle. They also did a bit of polling, and they looked at race relations in New Zealand. So let's have a quick look at that.
It seems the country's divided on race relations, with almost half the people surveyed in our latest One News Varian poll saying the situation's got worse. And it comes as politicians gear up for October's election, with fears race could become a political football. Deputy Political Editor.
Could become a political football. It's not one now. Could become one though.
So Mikey Sherman has more.
Parliament, known for the rough and tumble of politics, at times described as verging on race baiting.
I know who causes violence in the world. It is white cis men.
Te mana o te wai, concepts of Māori and spiritual matters which should have absolutely no bearing on decision making.
Constantly bashing Māori.
But as the election campaign nears, it's feared issues like co-governance will ramp up race politics.
National's position's really clear. We don't believe in the co-governance of public services. We believe we are one country.
I've acknowledged this in the whole time that I've been Prime Minister, but we need to make sure that we're bringing people along with us.
So far, people are divided. In our poll, we asked, do you believe race relations are getting worse or better?
What are your thoughts, Chewy? Do you believe race relations are getting worse or better or staying the same in New Zealand? I'm not saying what do you reckon. Have a guess what they're going to be. I mean, what do you reckon?
I think they, overall, they are getting better.
Yeah.
I think the discourse around them is getting worse.
I'm often reminded, and I think I've mentioned this a few times before, the documentary Bowling for Columbine, when Michael Moore goes with an academic into South Central Los Angeles. And, it was the area where Rodney King was beaten. and they look around, and it's a lovely leafy sort of a street, and it's got nice trees, and it looks all pretty and that kind of stuff. And they have this conversation around violence, and they said the evidence was that violence was going down, but the coverage of violence or murders had gone up by 600%. So do you believe race relations are getting worse or better or staying the same in New Zealand? I think unarguably it's getting better. And I think the reporting of race relations is unarguably getting worse. That's what I think. And I think you'll see that they talk to a few people here. And obviously it's not a particularly big sample size. But what they talk to here, the people they talk to here, the old white ones are like, it's getting worse. The brown ones are like, it's getting better. And the young ones are like, it's getting better, or, same old, same old. And like I said, we can't take that. Anecdotal evidence doesn't necessarily represent the data, but that data wouldn't surprise me if old white New Zealanders, because of what they've been told by some people, say it's getting worse. And everyone else is like, it's getting worse in some sectors, and the worst areas that it's getting, and those sectors are the areas of old white people being told it's getting worse. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what I wonder. But let's have a look what the actual research came up to saying, or the polling said.
Better or staying about the same in New Zealand. Only 14% say it's getting better. 35% believe it's about the same, while 47% say race relations are getting worse. The rest don't know or refuse to say.
I have seen the deterioration quite detrimental.
I think they've got better. I've been here for about 20 years.
There are flare-ups here and there, but I think overall things are better.
In some places it's gotten a lot better, some places definitely a lot worse.
Wherever the government divides people by race, ACT will be there to criticise them. We make no apology for that.
Just this week, an ACT Party media release was headlined, Labour asks pharmacists to racially profile.
Almost every second press release the ACT Party puts out is centred around race.
Well, it's certainly not every second one, but
the ACT Party continue to lie.
Puts out is centred around race.
Well, it's certainly.
Oh, that mouth noise he makes is unpleasant.
This face right here
is punchable.
Is so much a perfect face for an H to be put on the forehead. Like this particular face, this particular moment looks like it should have an H on the forehead. Like just purely the face he pulls. It's fascinating. So
is centred around race.
Well, it's certainly not every second one, but
the ACT Party continue to lie. The ACT Party continue to lie about the treaty.
In the end, no political party can claim to be holier than thou on this, and that's because our poll shows there are many people who don't feel well served by either side of the argument.
So you can't keep your politicking on a moment in time based on fear and division. People will see through that.
Another big issue causing big debate this election. Mikey Sherman, One News.
All right, there you go, Chewy. What are your thoughts, sir?
What? Sorry, one second. Pad for time.
Oh, okay. Padding. So nothing bad happened in New Zealand today. What a fun time.
There we go. My masterpiece.
Well done, sir.
There we go.
Very quick. Very quick.
Yeah, like I do think overall things are getting better. Like you go back 10 years ago, 20 years ago, the perception that race relations were doing fine because we barely considered anything to do with the treaty or Māori.
Yeah.
Like I remember how treaty settlements were dealt with by the media at that point, as an example. The lip service that was paid to Māori culture or the language. Things are getting better. And I think, again, for the vast majority of people, they just get on with it. They just adapt. But the discourse, it's almost like the people that are losing this fight, the people that don't want to, that want it to be a very European-centric country in the South Pacific, I think they feel squeezed. And I'm not opposed to that. But their reaction is loud.
Yeah.
And they've got a political party or two backing them up. But I think in the place where we're at, where someone like Julian Batchelor can get in a car and go from one end of the country to the other, holding these little meetings, which are combated in almost every place he goes to. But he also always has people turn up to them.
Yeah.
I think that's another thing. And we focus on, well, I focus on it. And it just becomes that perception, right? That it, and this is why I say the discourse around race relations has got worse.
No, and I think that's a huge part of it. I mean, like, again, anecdotal evidence may not necessarily represent the data, but when you look at the brown guy, pardon my blunt, identifying the person who said, I've been here for 20 years and it's getting better, I would take his position of knowledge of race relations above and beyond the 60-year-old white woman who has never had to worry about race relations in her life. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So, hey, Chewy, turn off your mic in StreamYard and turn on your mic in Discord. And let's go have a chat to some people and we'll see if we can get this working. If you'd like to have a chat with us, a chance for you to win yourself a whatever it's called, some of the gear that we've got, then if you're in Discord right now, head yourself to the waiting room. Are you with us, Chewy? Have you turned yourself on in there?
Testing.
Oh, there you go. We've got you. So we've got Angus here as well. And I think we tried Angus last week and it didn't work. His mic didn't work. So Angus, hopefully you've sorted your shit out this week. Just kidding. We'll see how it goes. Right. Angus, are you with us, sir?
Yeah, can you hear me?
We can hear you. What's going on?
Oh, great. Just relieved you can hear me. Yes.
What's up, Angus? You're with us. You're on. You're talking.
Yes. Hello. Yes. I just want to apologise for last week. I couldn't get in last week. My earbuds and my wired headset decided to have a fight over who had custody over the laptop, and I couldn't get the microphone to work. But this week I have, and I'm just grateful that you two exist.
Bless.
I found you recently, and I'm just enjoying what you're doing. And last week I wanted to talk about the tax situation with Labor and the fact they chickened out on taxing the rich. And I'm still feeling bad about it, and I've been trying to sort of hone in on why that is over the last week. And I think it's because I've come to the conclusion I've been waiting so long, like for the end of neoliberalism, and if I know that wasn't like going to be the final nail in the coffin of neoliberalism, but it was just so disappointing that it was going to be something that was going to sort of mark a change, and it didn't happen, and I was just really disappointed about that.
Well, if you listened to us last week, Angus, you'll be very clear that we don't only think that it's cowardly, but also dumb politics, because the majority of New Zealand want what they're turning down.
Yeah, I agree, and definitely going to be voting Green now, I think, instead of Labor. Been thinking about that as well, and I've had some experience, even personally, because I used to work in the electrical distribution industry, and just how much we get scammed because of a lack of public ownership, and the fact that it's seen that privatization works better than public ownership, and it just doesn't in certain situations. And I think the electrical industry, because I've got knowledge of that, is just a classic example where you see neoliberalism at work, and it just doesn't benefit us,
Do you think it's happening in the electrical sector, or it's happening in every business sector? Because I would doubt that neoliberalism is only seen in one sector of business.
Definitely.
Yeah, across the board, but your knowledge is in that area.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see, like at the moment, the English or the British are having a massive sort of look at water ownership, ownership of water companies, the fact that they got privatised. But they're monopolies, and it's the same. There's no competition, and they just get bloated and fat. They make huge profits that they don't put back into the infrastructure and go straight to the shareholders, and it doesn't benefit the public, which is what they were set up for originally as utilities. And it's in it like in our industry, in the electrical industry. You have this Enron scheme, this Enron type scam going on, where you'll have a holding company that looks after the assets, and you'll have a construction company as part of that, which charges them for maintaining the network, right? But they'll put 25% profit on whatever they charge the asset company. That's 25% that comes off of that goes on to our bills. Right, we got to pay for that. And they're quite happy to do that. The asset company's quite happy to do that because it inflates the asset price, which of course is what they want, because that's how they determine how much they're going to charge you. The more assets they've got, or not the more assets, but the more valuable those assets are, the more that they can charge us. And so the more that the construction company can charge the asset company, the better. And that's just like an internal rort that goes on. And so there's not much in the way of checks and balances there. There's no competition. There's only one construction company, certainly in provincial areas, like where I live. There's no competition for that construction company. They can charge whatever they want to the asset company, and the asset company's happy to pay it because they can then charge more and get more revenue.
All right.
So,
Chewy, do you want to jump in with anything?
Yeah, I think there's a really good example out there for that as well. You mentioned the UK, but trains in the UK, they privatised their whole network.
Hey, Chewy, sorry to interrupt you, mate. You need to come right into your microphone because your levels are different now that you're not on StreamYard. So come speak very close. You have to speak very close to your microphone, I think.
Okay, I can fix that.
Sorry, dude. While he's doing that, actually, Angus, you said you found us recently. How did you find us?
Oh, it's just on YouTube, basically, and it just the algorithm was gracious enough to put you up.
Oh, bless.
And so I clicked on it. I hadn't heard of you guys, unfortunately. But then I went back and watched a few old videos and saw that you did a live stream, so I decided to get into that. So just grateful because there's not a lot of left-leaning media, I don't think. Well, maybe there is, and I just don't know about it.
There's actually only.
There's not.
I mean, if you think probably Bomber's the only other one doing it, but he's not doing what we're doing. Bomber's doing more, getting everybody on and kind of. I'm not saying he's giving a centrist position, but the show is very much that. There is no one doing what we're doing, to be perfectly honest with you. But Chewy, you're back with us?
Hopefully that should be a bit better.
Much better.
In the UK, they privatised the train network to bring in efficiencies and competition and bring down the prices, right? Instead, they've almost paralyzed their entire network. And it's not great for the consumer. It's not great for the country. It's great for those shareholders.
Yeah.
And as a point of irony,
with our trains, we're trying to do the same thing. And can you catch a train anywhere? No.
Oh, no. And a massive point of irony there for the UK rail is that one of the shareholders, and I can't put my hands on the facts, but I remember reading that one of the biggest shareholders is German rail, which is owned by the public in Germany. So the profits that the British are paying to the company goes back to get invested in German public rail through the shareholding.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Hey, Angus, thanks so much for giving us what do you call this? Giving us a call? Is that what we say, Chewy? I don't even know.
Works for me.
Might as well.
Giving us a call. Appreciate you calling in, and I guess because that's pretty much our only call for tonight, Angus, you've got yourself some of our July merch, which you'll have to let us know about super quick, Angus, if you can connect through us. I don't know if Angus is a patron or just a lurker. Connect with us through Facebook, Angus, and I'll send you a promo code where you'll be able to buy yourself a t-shirt for $0. And speaking of that, I guess it's probably appropriate for me to do this one time at least.
Thank you very much for your contribution. Thank you very much. Thank you very, very, very much.
So Ewan bought himself a t-shirt tonight, so thanks, Ewan. I appreciate that. And if any of you other dudes, dudettes and others are interested in coming on board and supporting what we do and getting some of our merch, then all you need to do is head to... There it is. I'm just trying to figure it out. There it is. bhnshop.nz. These shirts are coming down at midnight tonight. So really, it's now or never. And if you'd like to get If the Left Votes, the Left Wins, or Christopher Luxon, Not a Businessman, Just a Board Member. I thought the Christopher Luxon one was very, very clever, but I have to tell you, it's 10-1 if the Left Votes, the Left Wins, people are ordering them. It's absolutely getting smacked. So
I think that more speaks to the powerfulness of that particular slogan. It's not saying that the other one's bad. It's just the left vote, the left wins is enormously good.
Yeah. And also not just enormously good, but also very, very, very true. So I think that's pretty much us for the week, team. It's been a hell of a week. It's been a pretty massive old conversation to finish up on tonight, isn't it?
Shall we finish on the goal, the game winning goal?
Shall we do this? There's one more person in the waiting room. Shall we go and have a chat to Steve? But I got to say, Steve, I know Steve's gone. He's hung up. That's the Steve ran away. So if you want to finish on whatever you just said, go for it. And I'm going to minimize. This, and then I'm out of there. Oh, is this the actual 1-0, is it? Let's see it.
This is the goal. Look,
this will get us taken off YouTube. Thanks for that.
Right from the net.
Yeah. Oh, real. Okay. So that's a full length.
That's nicely done. Hand is off after it. Wilkinson's in the middle. Wilkinson!
Oh, that's spectacular. Now take it down before we get taken off YouTube for sharing, because FIFA are going to be incredibly. We are FIFA. We are a news fair use show, and we just reported one of the biggest news stories, the biggest sporting news stories in New Zealand today. We're making a report on that. It's fair use. Don't even try it. All right, guys.
Yeah, take that, FIFA.
Take that, FIFA. We've got more money than you because we've got a Patreon and we've got and we've got some merch and stuff. Okay. Now I promised a meetup this week, and I'm sorry. I've had a lot of stuff going on this week. I haven't had time to organise it. I do apologise. So I guarantee you that there will be a meetup next Saturday morning for patrons. All right. I pledge to you it will happen. Next Saturday morning, there will be a patron meetup. Thanks to our patrons. I know I haven't mentioned you a lot in the last couple of days. There's been a couple of new ones. We'll get back to you guys on Monday. We appreciate you. We love you to bits. You help us do what we do. And see, JK, FIFA, 1.363 billion profit for FIFA, BHN. I think we're at about 2 billion profit now, aren't we? Is it 2 billion? 1.95 or something?
It's certainly not in New Zealand dollars, but yes, in something.
Zimbabwean krona or something like that. Cambodian dongs, something like that. No, it's Vietnamese, isn't it? The Vietnamese dong.
Like we have 1.63 billion dong. That's a lot of dong.
Yeah, it's the biggest dong I've ever heard and seen, to be honest with you. All right, guys, we will see you. FIFA are corrupt. Give them a boardroom hoodie. We'll see you Monday. Be safe out there. Hug a friend. Tell someone you love them. And next Monday at 9 p.m. we will be back. We hope to see you all there. Be safe through the weekend. Bring a friend. And if you've bought yourself merch of us, you're probably going to get emails in the next 48 hours. Maybe not 48 hours, but shortly saying that your order has been fulfilled and it's on its way. Whenever that is, before the middle of next week. So thank you for being involved, patrons. Thank you for being involved, merch purchasers. Thank you for being involved, lurkers and viewers. And we've enjoyed doing this and bringing it to you. And we'll see you Monday night from 9 p.m. for another edition, Chewy.
Sounds good.
All right. Hooroo team.
Cheers, folks.